It was like I felt like somebody was walking right beside me every moment of my life saying, of course this is where you'd end up. This makes perfect sense. You know you didn't deserve that in the first place. You knew they would find you out. So here you are, where you deserve to be. My past had resurfaced and hit me smack in the face. And I became a living, walking testimony of the way that I grew up. We grew up in rural North Carolina, worked in agriculture, tobacco fields. We were sharecroppers. My mom and several of us kids worked cropping tobacco and picking cotton up until I was about 14 years old. My dad beat my mom, so watching that really created some horrible internal stuff for me. In my mind, the only thing I could see was an environment where I felt less than. I didn't feel as good as other people. Then home was no better. So all of those things together in my little mind, I say, when I become a big guy, I'm leaving here. Yeah, when I was 11th grade, an Air Force recruiter came through. Anyone that wanted to get out of class that day could go take the Air Force exam. And I took the test as a junior in high school to enter the Air Force. Well, when he came back and said, Sinclair, you passed. Here's several jobs that you can go into with your score. It all came flooding back on me. I want to leave here. I want to find a way out. So this felt like, after finding I had passed, a perfect opportunity. I went to basic like everyone, and I went to tech school in Illinois for fuels management, and I got orders to Colorado. I was 18 years old when I came here. Had a great tour, 3 years here. Left as an E5 after 3 years in the Air Force. My dreams were that I was going to be the Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. But people that don't know what that means the highest ranking enlisted person in the Air Force. That was my goal. So yeah, my career was on track. Went back to Pope Air Force Base, North Carolina for 18 months, and then was stationed in Okinawa, Japan for the last 3 years. I felt like it was like a glove in hand fit, that I had found my purpose in life. People were investing in me. And for the first time in my life, I felt like someone really could see that I was worth something. When I walked into work that morning, immediately it was, Sinclair, we need to talk. Fuel just leaked, more poured out of the tank during the night as people left it unsecure. So it's just like putting a hose in your tank at the gas station, and it doesn't have a shutoff valve on the hose, and you walk into the store because you put it on that click, and the click sticks, and the fuel just continues to pour out, and you come back outside and there's fuel all around your vehicle. That was my first real confrontation in my 7th year in the Air Force, of having to deal with something that was incredibly negative. It was like my dad yelling at me about something I'd done wrong. And when I walked in, the frowns on the faces in that room. And I knew what the regs were. I knew what the rules were. So I felt horrible. I felt inside, I felt like I had arrived at the failure that I always deeply inside knew that I was. I could have had still a very respectable career even after that, but to me, the pinnacle was that Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. That's what I wanted to be. So the moment you get a blemish on your record, that dream goes away. I started blaming the Air Force. I started blaming the E4. I started blaming the circumstances. I blamed everything but me and taking responsibility for what I'd done. So I just started hanging out very late at night, drinking. A few times they had to send people to my apartment off base to get me, to bring me to work and etc. because I would sleep in from over drinking. They removed my responsibility. So I became a guy with a lot of stripes that was really doing the same work as people 2 ranks below me because they didn't trust me with that responsibility anymore. So the wheels started turning. They just wanted, because I'd had 7 good years in the Air Force, they wanted me to finish out my 8 years with a semblance of dignity. When it was time to re-enlist again, they wouldn't let me. They said, you're finished with the military. When I came back to the States, I went to North Carolina to say bye to my family because I was going back to Japan. I just had a wild hair. Why don't you go back to Colorado Springs one last time on your way back to Japan? See if you can run across some old buds or whatever. So I rented a car, rented a motel room down on South Nevada. And every night I'd go out to try to find a bar or something. So 3 weeks I went just going out every night, getting blitzed, being the life of the party, doing all that stuff. And when I woke up after 3 weeks of doing that, and the landlord knocked on the door and he says, it's time to renew. And I looked through my pockets, man, and I had nothing. And I pleaded with this guy, man, I'll go get day jobs. I'll do whatever you need me to do. Just give me an opportunity to go earn the money. He said, no, we don't do that here. You're out. So I turned in my rental car and I hit the streets of Colorado Springs. And that's when I became a homeless guy here. So I used to sleep underneath the bush every day, and this guy would go through the park. And later he told me, out of the corner of his eye, he could see me sleeping underneath the bush every day. And he didn't want to approach, but it was something odd. I didn't seem like the typical homeless guy to him. So over time, his curiosity got the best of him. He came over and asked me to tell my story. How did you get here? And as I began to tell him, you could see the compassion begin to rise in his eyes, in his heart. And he said, man, I don't do this, but would you go home with me? Something about his eyes and the way he reached out and the way that he looked at me told him that he was looking beyond the obvious. But he took me home, put some parameters around what I could do in his home, could cook, a bedroom, here you go. Here are the clear-cut parameters around you staying here. So that gave me the proper motivation because he believed that I could do that or he wouldn't have took me in the first place. So next day, I immediately went out to start finding a job. 2 days later, I was working for a company called Adelphia, which is now Comcast here in town, and had a job. 1 year later, Raytheon recruited me as the chief of the fuels management branch at Air Force Academy. So what are the odds, right? 1 year I'm sleeping underneath the bush. Next year I'm the chief of fuels management for Raytheon. And then I started doing work in leadership development and interpersonal communications in corporations, facilitating that in business. And these are the things that my kids, 3 of them that are business executives in Denver now, became the inspiration for me starting Dream Again and saying, you know what, all this wraps up to me helping new business owners gain traction and understand the value that they create for community. And that's the heart of Dream Again. So he took a calculated risk intuitively on someone that he didn't know. So Dream Again is a calculated risk on people that I often don't know, but I can see past what they're showing me. He showed me how to see them. Hope is definitely the key to movement in life at any level, because quite frankly, you're not going to engage intellectually if you don't have hope. You won't engage emotionally if there's no hope at the foundation of your movement. So we try to create avenues of hope for you so that you can see clearly the vision, the goal, the mission, and the purpose of why you're doing what you're doing. And when that unveils the way it's supposed to, you become an unstoppable force in business.